Hello Mandem, it's your boy Kaito here. So something that's come up constantly, not only in response to any tier lists I posted, but also in conversation when talking about if characters are good or not, is the word niche. Typically, this is used negatively to bring units down. Obviously, if you're niche, you have less use cases, which means you're less useful, which would ultimately mean you're worse. But is this actually the case? Mostly no, but sometimes sure. When units are judged on how good they are, it's entirely comparative. Just about every unit is able to 36-star Abyss with the correct investment and setup. This is why it's important to understand that when a unit is ranked lower in a tier list, it doesn't mean they're bad, it just means they're worse than the units ranked above them. That brings us to the main point of the video. Is being niche actually bad? And which units are even niche in the first place? To give a watered down example for the sake of context, niche would mean specific or uncommon. If a unit provides buffs to a small portion of the playable characters, they're deemed to be niche. I think that in the context of other games that would be correct, but for Genshin, I believe it's wrong. I think that instead of using how many units a character works with as a basis of how niche they are, we should instead use how often the team they're used in actually works in the Abyss. As an example, I don't believe Goro to be niche, because Monogia has worked in the Abyss since the launch of the game. It can even work in the previous Abyss cycle, as it can break the Cryolictor shields at a workable pace, and it works in the current one because you can slot in a Flex Electro slot for the first side. We don't call Ito a niche DPS, so why do we call Goro niche when Ito is actually dependent on Goro to do any relevant damage? But Goro can buff 2 units other than Ito with Noel and Albedo. Ito literally has one role, it's to be an on-field DPS. With the criteria, I guess, of everything I've said here, he would be insanely niche, but he isn't, and no one says he is. The new wave of dedicated supports also suffer from the same categorization from the community. I don't want to make this video 2 hours long, so I won't go over Faruzan, Sarah, and Shenhe in their own segments, but I'll mention them throughout the video. For now, let's completely disregard what I've mentioned beforehand, and let's just say Goro is niche. Would that actually be a bad thing? Let's compare him to Bennett. Sure, he works in less teams than Bennett, but in the team that he actually works in, he does a better job than Bennett. On top of being a better option, Goro would free up Bennett for a different team that would like him more, let's say Xiao or International. It's one of the reasons I think that Ito is great. He uses supports that have very little team diversity. Zhongli, who isn't really required on 99% of the game's teams, and literally any flex slot. But enough shilling Geo, let's get back to the topic. I do understand the logic of, well, if Bennett and Goro buff the same amount, but Bennett buffs 30 characters and Goro just 3, then sure, Bennett is just the better unit. While this just happens to be true in this comparison, it doesn't always work out this way. Albedo's 125 EM share works for literally every single character that can trigger reactions. So all of them, even that one. But he is not a better unit than Faruzan, who just buffs a select few crit build and Nemo DPSs. Faruzan buffing Scaramouche and Zhao, but mostly Zhao, offers much more value than any possible team Albedo is used in. I've seen too many tier lists or just people in general that genuinely think that Albedo is better than Faruzan. It's quite funny when people give these biased takes and are completely unaware of it. Be a man, give biased takes and admit to it. Now this video, of course, I'm 100% spitting facts. On God, for real. Being a specific buffer isn't a bad thing, it just means you're well made to fit a specific team's needs. I'd rather them release a specific 40% DPS increase over a generalist, I don't know, Hydro Infusion character that has actually no use cases. This windy boy right here is one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this in the first place. I've been told countless times about how Venti works in countless teams and he's a mega versatile unit and that he's not niche at all. Now this to me can't be further from the truth. Venti's value changes with the Abyss cycles. He can either be the best unit in the game with zero competition or just below average at best. On release, he was that guy. He was tier 0. He was a must-pull character. He followed all content, including the Abyss, until, well, the release of Inazuma, after which we got the introduction of a different style of Abyss. Instead of the usual common enemy mobbing abysses, it also had bosses. And when it didn't have the bosses, the enemy count was not 12, it was 3 or 4 at a time when they had higher HP. And half of these enemies you couldn't even crowd control inside of his burst. This completely killed the one thing that made him that tier 0 juggernaut he was on launch. After 2.0, the amount of times that Venti has properly worked in the Abyss can be chalked down to when they want to sell him or Kazuha to you. He's niche, and his niche is rarely ever prevalent in the Abyss cycles. Now, the exact same thing can be said about Beidou, while having a very flexible kit, being an off-field electro applicator that triggers the application on normal and charge attacks, and having a pretty good AoE, she's absurdly niche. What she excels in mostly is 2 low mobility enemies that sit close to each other. Without it, her damage is just not that high. Furthermore, her burst cannot trigger Hyper Bloom, which is one of the best low investment teams after 3.0/Dentro's release. With this in mind, she's absurdly niche, and I can't recall off the top of my head the last time we had an Abyss with her perfect scenario actually be prevalent. Now, the main thing I wanted to talk about here is that Genshin is a different kind of game. You need 2 teams, and sometimes those 2 teams do not work in the next Abyss as well as you want them to, which is why it is completely and perfectly acceptable to have units that do not buff every single team in the game. Plus, that would be pretty boring. Having a character be relevant and optimal on every single team would be absolutely horrible for team building. It would be a nightmare, because you would also encounter the same arguments of, why would you pull this unit? You already have this, which is exactly what happened with Kazuha's release of, why would you pull Kazuha? You already have Sucrose, which is a stupid argument, it always was. And the exact same thing happened with Yelan. Why would you pull Yelan? You already have a Xingqiu. She's just a worse Xingqiu. And oh, why would you pull Kazuha? You already have a Sucrose. Kazuha is just Sucrose, but worse. People still do not understand the value that Kazuha brings to the table. Now, calculations and Excel sheets are great. They can give us a general understanding of how much damage a team would do in their perfect scenario. But when it comes to actual gameplay, you will soon realize that Sucrose is quite shit. When I'm playing International, which is one of the teams I played the longest and now I despise, I would much rather get rid of Shangling and put in, I don't know, Dea even, than get rid of Kazuha and put in Sucrose. He is that essential to the team. Now, instead of shitting on Sucrose, let's get back to the main point a bit again. I do this a lot, if you couldn't tell. You don't need every character to work in every team, and being a specific buffer just lets you use the characters that work in other teams in those other teams. It is not that difficult of a concept to grasp, and I am genuinely astonished that people still do not understand this, that if you're niche when it comes to the team you buff, it's not bad. And these characters like Goro, Shenhe, Faruzan, they're not bad units because they buff a small amount of teams. These units would be bad if when they buff a small amount of units and teams, they're not optimal in them, like Mika is. He's horrible. That's why he's bad. It's not because he's niche, no, it's because he's terrible. He offers nothing to the character that he is released to buff, which is Eula, or any physical option. He's horrible. He offers virtually nothing, which is why he's terrible. Goro offers a significant amount to Ito. With and without him, the damage difference for Ito is close to 40%. Faruzan offers even more to Zhao. She's very close to being a 50% DPS increase with and without. Now, of course, that number will even out when, let's just say, okay, instead of Faruzan, you have Fischl, so now instead of just having no sub DPS, you compare Zhao's damage with Faruzan to Zhao and Fischl. Now, that is a different scenario, but I'm just saying, she is a 40% DPS increase to Zhao's personal damage, which, may I remind you, is pretty good when he is a hyper carry. He is currently one of the strongest single target DPSs in the game, and he's AoE. He is an AoE DPS. He has a lot of AoE. A low investment Zhao can easily crack 100k plunges with a C0 Faruzan. This is how ridiculous she is, and I'm tired of people undermining this character because she's niche. Oh, she needs C6. No, horrible, terrible. One of the worst things I've ever heard, ever. Do not. It's inconceivably stupid for you to not count Faruzan at C6 because it's unlikely that a low spender or a free to play or a new player will not have it. You're undermining that character's strength. You're completely forgetting about that character's full potential. It's like if I said, oh well, I don't have Changyun at C6, so why should I count Changyun at C6? Well, it's stupid. It doesn't matter if you don't have it. You should calculate the character at a relatively easy to achieve level of investment, which would be, I think, C6 for 4 stars and C0 for 5 stars. Unless they're standard banner characters, which, depending on what scenario you're in or what type of player you're catering to, I think you can push that from anywhere from C2 to C6. I personally count the standard characters at C6 because they're not really relevant at C0. The only character that's relevant at C0 in standard is Tchnari, and he's just a side grade too. I'll hate him. Now, I'll give a couple final words here. I've rambled on way too long on this absolutely annoying garbage. Faruzan buffing basically only 2 units is not bad. That's completely acceptable in a game like Genshin Impact. Albedo buffing for 125 EM is worthless. I just want to put that out there, that being quote unquote niche is not bad, and being a versatile generalist buffer that offers a very amazing 125 EM is quite bad. With all of that in mind, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, share the video around, give me them views. I'm coming for you, Flip. Afumedo.